Hey, this is Jay.
And this is Chelsea.
Welcome to the Shifting Perceptions podcast.
We are bringing you inspiration to live a more creative lifestyle because our favorite people are the ones that choose the path less traveled.
Hey guys, this is Jay. For most professional musicians, winning an Emmy Award and being Grammy-nominated would pretty much be the tip of the iceberg for one's career. But for my next guest, David Nichtern, it's just another part of his journey. David, rightfully so, seems to take pride in his ability to not be too attached to labels and ego-based accolades. But by no means does that stop him from achieving at levels that most people would envy. Now, without giving away too much of his story, let's assign some labels to him anyway. In no specific order, our guest today is an author, a senior Buddhist teacher, a CEO, a business consultant to clients such as Goldman Sachs. He is a published composer, a producer, a professional guitarist who's recorded and jammed with the likes of Stevie Wonder, Jerry Garcia, and Paul Simon, and has written songs for soap operas such as One Life to Live, and one of his songs that he wrote actually became a mainstream classic, which is called Midnight at the Oasis, which you might have heard. We got really deep on this one. We talked about some of my favorite topics: spirituality and creative process, and the importance of intention and awareness, and life-changing milestones such as becoming a parent and being able to pivot in your career after you've achieved quite a bit of success. I think you're going to like this one because I really did. We hit the ball back and forth quite a bit and reached in really deep to, I think, bring a conversation that you're going to love and find benefit in. It was really great to talk to someone who has a lot of parallels that I share with. Though he's a musician professionally and I'm a visual artist professionally, there's so much connection and cohesion, and the fact that we're both rather spiritually connected and Northeast guys. He's from Long Island, I'm from New Jersey. There definitely felt to be a connection there that, though this was our first time talking, it just felt really great to converse with David, and I think you'll feel that in the conversation. So let's get to it.
You're quite multifaceted, right?
As are you.
Yeah.
As are you, my friend.
Multifaceted club.
Yes. I'm excited to chat with you, and I did some digging into your career on top of already knowing a bit about you, and I'm excited. Like you say, we're both eclectic characters, so it's always nice to meet a like-minded, creative, spiritual, crazy person, right?
Well, it's an interesting topic already because, as you know, I wrote that book, Creativity, Spirituality, and Making a Buck. And, I think there's a lot of us out there. That's my theory.
Yes.
We're trying to put things together, that are a little more eclectic maybe. And I think it's more so even in the younger folk, that are coming around now. I call them the hyphenates.
The hyphenates, explain that one. Can you dive into that a bit?
I'm a producer, novelist, journalist, painter, meditation teacher, kindergarten gym class leader.
That's great. I love that because I call that my friend Chris first told me this term. He calls them slashes, which kind of stuck with me. I'm an artist slash writer slash dad slash, so same meaning. That's great.
Yeah, and I didn't make it up. I mean, I've had people hand me their business cards and so forth, and it'll say stuff like that on it. Yeah,
that's great. I think it's a nice way to go through life when you don't feel too anchored to one aspect of your career or your life, and you have, I think, people like us that are creative, people that are listening that are creative, spiritual people. It's nice to not have too much attachment to any one part of your created or assumed identity, because I feel like that really can kind of make your life feel too static, and it does feel nice to be able to kind of pick up and pivot. Like you seem like the same or similar mindset, whereas if I discovered a part of myself that was calling me next week, I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with just picking up and shifting that direction, even though I've worked my whole life towards being an artist. If something else, like parenting, for instance, as soon as I became a dad, the next day I was a completely different person and didn't really see that coming as much as I thought I did.
Yeah, I call it the largest secret society in the world.
Parenting?
Parents. Yeah.
Yes. And
nobody, they could tell you, but you wouldn't believe them.
That's what's really messed up about it, is because my dad's been telling me my entire life. Everyone tells you all the same cliche stuff, and I was the different one. I was the one that wasn't like everyone else until I was, and then all of a sudden I'm like, I got it now. You feel like
what did you have? What kind of offspring do you have?
So my daughter is 7, and I have twin boys that are 6.
Wow!
So we went from thank you. We went from 0 to 3 kids within 1 week shy of 18 months. So it was quite an express plan. When my daughter was born, I felt like that was the closest to, for lack of a better words, meeting God. It was like the closest I came to, like, wow, like the meaning of life. And after that, I told our birth doula at the time, I was like, all right, I'm ready to have 14. Let's do this. And then I had twins. And, how about you? How many do you have?
Well, I have one son, and then he has a beautiful daughter. So I'm a grandpa.
Congrats!
She's going to be 4 in a couple of weeks.
That's great.
Izzy Atlas.
What a powerful name.
Yeah, Nichtern. Izzy Atlas Nichtern. Yeah.
What is? Can I ask? I'm sure I'll have to learn this myself. But what have you found are the biggest mind shifts of I'm a grandpa now all of a sudden? Are there comparisons to becoming a dad? Are there like I'm a grandpa moments?
Yeah, it's much easier.
Easier.
You just get the good parts.
What about is there?
I think she might have pooped in her diaper here.
Is there
you might want to take her now?
Is there like a spiritual equivalent? Like I don't know what it was like for you, but when I came like a dad, it was like, whoa, I'm a dad, holy moly! Like it was just very spiritual and just crazy. And is there something like that? Like, oh my God, my offspring has a child. Like, is there?
Yeah, I think there's a feeling of ripening or maturation that comes along, and a little less panic about stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
A little less, what are we going to do now? What are we going to do with this thing now? Because I remember, like, when my son was born, he's just screaming in our faces, and you just go, what do you do with this?
Yeah.
So I think the good news about ripening is, there's a feeling of less panic about things.
What do you suppose the either artistic or spiritual parallel would be to that experience? Because I think when artists or anyone creative first kind of discovers or accepts that they're a creative spiritual being, I think there is sort of like an awakening of that. Like, what do I do with this thing? I don't know. I have a talent. I have an interest. I have a curiosity. Like, I don't know what to do with this. Should I do anything with it? Should I ignore it? Should I feed it? Like, what's the equivalent there?
Yeah. Well, in the spiritual domain, there actually is in the Buddhist world. I studied Tibetan Buddhism, and so my teacher was actually pretty young when I met him. I was even younger, and his name was Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. But his teacher, eventually, he brought his teacher over from who was living in Bhutan at the time, and his name was Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche. So he was like our spiritual grandfather, and he was, considerably older and mellower in a way. And there's a saying in the full cycle of Tibetan Buddhist teachings called "old dog," which is the sort of highest teaching. So they call it "old dog."
Okay,
it's just like imagine a lab or a golden retriever, just that's 12, 14 years old, just sitting in the corner of the room and just taking it in. And there's kind of like maybe an eyebrow goes up a little bit, something happens. So, and there's a feeling of everything that needs to be, have been accomplished, has been accomplished. And then that which needs to get accomplished will be taken care of properly. So old dog, isn't that cool? That's actually the highest state of meditation in the Tibetan Buddhist system is called old dog. That's the nickname for it.
I've heard similar types of teachings throughout different books I've read, different teachers. There's similar stories under different names, and it kind of brings up that age-old question or topic of, so if it's going to get done, why do I have to do anything? The idea of just understanding that your life or human beings or spiritual beings have a purpose that's predestined, so why bother? What would you say to people?
Okay. Now I got to jump right on top of that.
Yeah, please, because this is
jumping
something.
on the back of your surfboard here, Jay. Is that
do
okay?
it, man. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I can only speak from my perspective, which is sort of pretty deeply embedded in the Buddhist. So you're talking about what we'd call karma, right? How does karma work?
Sure.
And I would say karma is not fate in the sense that it's predestined. It is just a pattern that exists within the situation, which will tend, to progress in the way that the pattern progresses, but can be changed at any time. That's why you practice. You're actually changing your karmic situation when you practice. And the notion would be you could actually completely liberate from that pattern, manifest it in a completely different way. And there's a lot of examples of it, famous, yogis in the past and so forth, who maybe started off as kind of criminals or badly behaved people or confused people. And so the premise is that you can work with karma and you can shift karma. So that's a big difference between something that's predestined. Big difference.
Yeah, like I interpret it in my own way. Just like if something is whatever needs to get done shall get done, I take that as also an acceptance of like, you can't do everything. Whatever you put your intention towards eventually will get done, and if it doesn't get done, it doesn't get done, and therefore it is what it is, right? It's a little bit of like right.
Well, as I like to say, it is what it is till it isn't.
Yes, and
so yeah, but this is a good. I don't know if you jump into. I regularly jump into these kind of metaphysical conversations with all kinds of folks, but. The notion of destiny is a very interesting one, and agency, what your responsibility is in terms of. So one way I like to think about it is, probably the two most common things we do is push too hard and hold back too much, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of karma is created by pushing and by holding back. But if you stay on that edge, and in fact, I'm going to use a surfing analogy because I looked at your paintings, which are so cool.
Thank you.
Wow, I like your paintings a lot.
You're in a great spot in Long Island too. Are you into surf culture, the ocean, like beach, like?
I like the ocean and the beach, and I've never been on a surfboard. I've body surfed or whatever, but I've never formally surfed. But I think I might use the analogy of riding the wave, and finding the sweet spot and finding the right wave applies to more than just the physical act of surfing. So. If you're riding the energy of the situation, and you have a wakeful relationship to it, I think then you will naturally move towards the right part of the wave and take the ride. And if you try to push too much, you'll get ahead of yourself, and if you try to hold back, you're going to get squished.
But you do have to, whatever the medium is, you do have to kind of ride that edge. Like I use an example like with painting or music, and the creative process itself, for me, it's very much an intuitive process or almost a shamanic possession at times, as opposed to applying theory that I was taught, let's say. There's a little bit of both, of course, but for me, it's also, and I'm sure for yourself as well, there is a kind of dance with that resistance and like, well, here's my boundary, whether it's perceived or real, whether it's skill that feels limited or whether it's experience or whatever the case may be, pushing beyond that. And sometimes you could fall flat in your face, which is part of the learning process, and that's okay. Since you are as a self-described full-time musician and you studied at Berkeley, I would love to kind of understand your creative process, diving into like the music part of David. I would like to know a little bit about the process on how like an idea, where it comes from, where your interpretation of where it comes from, and how you dance with it, and how you kind of get past that obstacle that you feel, that friction.
Yeah, and of course, this is self-evaluation of a process, but I think anybody who's creative spends some time thinking about it, and most of the time just doing it. So my feeling about, and also, by the way, I'm self-described full-time musician and also full-time Buddhist teacher and practitioner. So I've got double full-time.
I had heard it. I must have heard an older interview because you said something like along the lines of like full-time musician and kind of like part-time teachers. Now you've progressed into full-time then. Now you're double full-time.
For years, I've been doing both full-on.
That's great.
What that leaves me not having is a full-time vacation time, that's for sure. But in the creative, I talked about it in my book as inception. I like that notion of inception. They made a whole movie about inception. That was
trippy
cool,
movie,
actually.
Crazy movie.
But inception to me is a dawning of an idea inside, creative person's mind, and it kind of comes from nowhere. It's clear as a bell that it just doesn't come from, and it comes at you. The closest thing to where it comes from is like the idea of a muse, that there's some in-between entity that kind of channels it your way. But really, it's a dawning, just kind of like pops up into your mind. And then, but I make a big deal about it in the book that, that's not the end of it. And that's actually doesn't make you an artist. Inception does not make you an artist. It makes you a potential artist. Because then you have to figure out which ideas you're going to pull down and bring them all the way down to earth. And then you have to figure out when you're going to finish it. Right. And then you have to figure out, am I selling this or not? Yeah. And then you're in business, and that's got its own whole set of rules. 100%. So I think, those things, I saw on your website that you have your prints up for sale. And it's very easy to access and organize. I even tried it out a little bit to see, okay, how would I get from here to there? So your business skills are what's being manifested there. It has nothing to do with your ability to sense the visual feeling of what you want to present. So inception, and then you figure out, is this my hobby or is this something I'm doing for business? And then in any case, you spend a certain amount of time pulling it down to the earth. So, for example, this pandemic, was a pretty wild time for a lot of us. And I've been traveling around the world teaching Dharma, and sometimes also playing with my friend Krishna Das, which is a music traveling gig sometimes. So I've been on the road, maybe 5 months a year for the last 7 or 8 years, maybe even 10 years. And all of a sudden, it's over. Not going anywhere. I've been on this couch actually for 15 months talking to people like you who appear out of nowhere and just you're having a conversation. So that's during the pandemic, I found myself having inception more frequently, you could say, and in almost a denser field of auspiciously descending ideas to do something with. And one of them is an album that I'm working on called Pandemonia. That's the name of it, Pandemonia. And it was just 10 instrumental pieces that came into my mind almost willy-nilly and just popped in. And as quick as I could, I'm just sort of taking dictation, writing them down. Then I started working in a digital format with a great keyboard player named Matt Oistreicher. And as in my case, a lot of times he's also a meditation student. So there's, there's a kind of doubling up of relationships. And, then we had some really great musicians play on it. These days you just send it to somebody and they add their part and send it along, as I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
And we're almost at the mixing stage now. So that'll be an album that came out of the pandemic. It's really spawned by, I doubt if it would have happened otherwise if I wasn't sitting in this house by myself for 15 months.
Have you found your process has changed over previous years or decades, even from maybe the way you've described it to perhaps earlier years? Has there been a time where it's like a daily practice versus waiting for those things to arrive? I find I have both at different times. How does that experience happen for you?
Well, if we're talking about the creative part, I find it's pretty spontaneous. And the exact feeling I've had, which probably you can relate to and other people can relate to, is I feel like I'm trying to remember something that I already knew. Have you had that experience?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's very much like I feel when I'm at that peak flow state, it feels like my brush is doing its thing and I'm just kind of watching it happen. And I'm just as intrigued watching what my brush is doing with my hand as someone else might be to watch me. And it's interesting because I have painted live in front of people many, many times, and people will tell me their experience of what it was like to watch me paint, and I don't know what you're going to do next, and all these sorts of things. And I'm like, I don't know either. That's what's so fun about it.
Wow. So that's interesting. the process of just kind of taking dictation or from some kind of source code. But there's also, as I was saying, a feeling of remembering it as if it had already existed. And I went, no, it goes like this. Don't you remember? Don't you remember? It goes like this. In the B section, it goes, you know, and it goes like that. So it's spontaneous, but it's also like a feeling of haunted by something, and it actually goes like this, and I'm recalling it. That's a kind of strange.
It's
feeling,
kind of.
It's true.
I probably didn't. I'm not describing it well, but for me, it is kind of like that. It's like I remembered it, but it's almost like it's happening. It has happened, and I remembered it all. It's like past, present, and future all at the exact same time. And as I'm watching it happen, it's like it's coming from a part of my mind that feels like a memory, but I also am working towards remembering or seeing what's already there. It's. I'm sure you can relate. It's hard to put into words, but
you know, Jay, you should have a gallery out in East Hampton. If you don't, do you have one?
I don't. I
because the surfs. You know, there's a whole surfing crowd out, like out in Montauk. Maybe I could just see your work in a gallery in Montauk. You know, it would be cool.
Montauk is awesome. I've done some events out there. I have a lot of collectors and fans and friends out there. The gallery business is something I tried. It's a tough one, but and also both owning one I have and also working with galleries. It's both are kind of unique, peculiar ways to do business.
Yeah. But it's cool. Your figures have a certain, you know, signature. That's another interesting thing about a creative process. Is just like my stuff is very eclectic. My music is like everything else. But the biggest influences that I had growing up were bluegrass and jazz.
I love jazz.
But imagine the two together. You know. Yeah. So, for example, one of my earliest adult kind of interesting gigs was with this mandolin player named David Nichtern, who's he's bluegrass trained, but he's playing kind of jazzy instrumental stuff. And he had a band with Jerry Garcia, which I joined. So I was in that band was called the Great American Music Band, and we're playing sort of early take jazzy bluegrass.
What year is this? What year is this, David?
So that would be like 75.
Okay.
Because I had a hit song on the radio called Midnight at the Oasis, so that was really fun. You know, I was kind of in a peak zone, and then I moved up to Marin County to live there, and then David Nichtern was an old friend of mine from New York, and then we started the band, and he already had this band with Garcia. He had a long history with Garcia. They made a lot of records together, and they were trying to move from a more songwriterly thing to a more, you know, playerly thing, and so I joined that band for a while. Really cool. We opened a Grateful Dead concert. That was an amazing experience.
That must have been incredible.
It was a whole universe. It was like an altered universe.
I can't even begin to imagine what that was like. So do you? I would assume that living through that and making it out the other side must have impacted your now spiritual life, right? Was that sort of an awakening?
Well, here's the funny thing is that at the same time, which was I started studying with Trungpa Rinpoche, my Tibetan teacher, in the early 70s. So I was going back and forth between that band and studying with Rinpoche. And that also, you know, was a form of Grateful Dead. I mean, that had it was a very vibrant scene. It was a very cutting edge scene. So it all somehow worked together. I have a hard time explaining this to people. It's like the joke is, you know, if you remember Woodstock, you weren't there.
Yeah.
But the one I like better is, you know, did you hear about Woodstock 2?
No.
There was some bad antacid going around. So, you know, those are pretty colorful times and formative for me and for a lot of people. But each decade I've tagged into some kind of cutting edge stuff, including some technology a little later on. And, you know, Buddhism was a thread going through it. Music was a thread going through all of it. But I feel like I've sort of tried to keep up with the zeitgeist. I'm not somebody who's very nostalgic, actually.
No?
It's odd.
Okay.
No, I like the cutting edge. I like what's happening right now.
So, you know, being in Marin County and hanging out with Jerry and living through that was, were drugs a big part of your creative process and your meditation? Like,
Oh,
I mean,
Lord.
they're a great hack into creativity, like just being very,
Well, look, when it comes to, drugs, there's like 0 to 10. I'm
yeah,
going to give myself a 3 or 4. It was never the main, like, oh, wow, man, let's just do this. I had friends who took acid like 47 days in a row.
yeah. I had friends like that
Can
too.
you imagine that? Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, I'm sure they exist now, but no. I'm like, I was a journeyer and periodically going on expeditionary force, and I suppose I smoked my share of pot, but I haven't done anything for decades, and I don't feel any movement towards that in my life right now at all. It's just I know the space. Um, yeah, it's not even an issue for me.
was that
But
was that a conscious decision on your part? Because I know for me and a lot of creative people, from college onwards up until I had children, those sorts of chemical hacks were an easy, fun, comfortable, and very effective pathway towards opening new ideas. And it wasn't until I became a father that I made a conscious decision to change my way of interacting with my talents or connection. Was there a conscious decision on your part? And if so, why and when?
I think over time, my sense of wasting time or how you spend time got tighter and tighter in a way. And so if there was going to be a journey involved, and maybe a kind of almost spiritual dimension to the practice, but I wasn't into using drugs for entertainment value. And you know in the Buddhist practice, you're willing to get bored and to get down and kind of grounded with the situation. And the older you get, the more that seems to be like almost imperative, because the preciousness of the time that you have becomes more obvious.
Yes. So there wasn't necessarily a conscious movement. Are there, aside from the chemical and psychoactive stuff we just kind of dabbled upon, are there hacks, including meditation? But are there other methods, techniques, hacks that if you feel yourself in or have felt yourself in a deadline situation for a client, you've done some commercial work, your work has been used in some commercial aspects. I would assume you're familiar with deadlines. If you're in that type of a situation, what do you do, and what could you perhaps suggest to other creative people listening as a means of tapping into that muse?
This is going to sound a little corny maybe, and this is how I got through the pandemic, actually. And it's gonna maybe resonate differently with different people. Mindfulness, not the commercial McMindful muffin, but actually paying attention and developing a discipline of bringing your awareness back to exactly what you're doing, and in a sense, pruning the distracted quality of the mind, and learning how to allow yourself to come back into the present, which is just the essential, kind of, that's the practice we teach. And it's so simple and so profound, but you have to be willing to be bored. Yeah. If you're not willing to get bored, and we talk about hot boredom and cool boredom, and the hot boredom is that kind of ants in your pants, kind of like, I got to do something, I got to do something else. And going through that to the point where you're actually able to, be steady with your attention. So I think that's because I noticed in the pandemic, my mind would start to wander, and go like, oh my goodness, spin out a little bit. Mm-hmm. What the heck? And especially with the political situation, what's going to happen to us, and then, I would just bring my mind back to, okay, I'm making an egg now.
Right.
That's what I'm doing.
Becoming present. I try to instill that teaching upon my children. They'll, as 6 and 7 year olds will do, I'm bored, Daddy, I'm bored. And I always will answer them something along the lines of like, that's awesome. I'm so jealous. That's fantastic. And then I try to explain to them, why is that awesome? They just don't get it. And
I mean, children, have so much. I remember when I was a kid, and it's a long time ago, but there was a guy there was a cereal called Wheaties.
I remember Wheaties.
And it's called Breakfast of Champions.
Yeah, Bruce Jenner was on it at the time.
Well, even before that, there was a guy named, I think, Richards. He was a decathlon champion or something like that. And of course, in the world you grew up in and I came to be in, it was the breakfast of chumps is what it really was, because it had no nutritional value whatsoever.
Yeah.
But they would show this decathlon champion. And I remember reading an article about this guy, and he's a decathlon champion. He had a 6-year-old kid, and he tried to keep up with him. Like if the kid would run around, he'd run around. If the kid would jump up and down, he'd jump up and down. And he was exhausted within 25 minutes. So kids have more kinetic energy for sure. I'm sure I'm not telling you something you don't know.
Yes, I'm quite familiar. Having 3 at such a young age, they're just bouncing off the walls. But we have been teaching them meditation and doing, ever since they were babies, we would have like a nightly om, like in a circle. And like as they progressed in age, we would do things that were slightly more advanced at each age. And like my kids are very familiar. Like when they go to sleep, I'll do like a meditation or like almost a hypnosis type trance situation to them to help them sleep and to kind of help them set their intention. And we always will ask them things like, what was your favorite part of the day, and try to frame things in a positive way. So I feel like that's very much a part. Plus, they all the time will see me doing artwork, or my wife and I will be doing yoga. Like we do stuff that I feel like is instilling in them important things.
Spiritual dad.
We try. We kind of have. As we started the conversation, we're rather eclectic and we're all over the place. And I feel like they see us working our asses off. They see us hustling and running a business, and then they see us meditating or doing yoga or like surfing or doing whatever it is. And we try to create balance both in ourselves and the children. And the best way you could teach your children is by modeling it, right? Showing people around you what's possible.
Well, and I'd like to testify that over years, I think you do find that even during challenging times of child rearing, how you manifest it is the key indicator of what they're going to pick up on later on, and it'll surprise you at some points. But it's you're exactly right about that, and it's inspiring to hear you talk like that, because I think the kids coming into the world now are going to have a pretty big challenge, and some of them are pretty advanced little beings. You can sort of feel that, and even in the crowd of the 20-somethings, there's some, I've been playing music my whole life, and I have a lot of, great friends who are part of that association, and sometimes we're looking at on YouTube and stuff and seeing what like a 25-year-old is playing, and you just go like, this is unbelievable, the level of skill.
Yeah.
What happened? Did they put something into the water or something? It's completely another level. It doesn't necessarily translate into artistry is one thing, or composing. That's one thing I've noticed. I haven't yet seen like, wow, look at the composition here. Look at these songs. I just watched a documentary on Bob Dylan. You go like, this is unbelievable songwriting. And I don't see a lot like that level, but the playing, the performance technology and the feel is ridiculous. So I just had a guy named Julian Lage. I don't know if you know who he is, but he's a great, great young jazz guitar player. Okay. And he's been playing since he was 11. And, it's like watching the complete fruition of what somebody who practices and has the keys to their instrument can do. And it's more than it was. So something has happened. And I feel like the people coming in now, like your kids, I wonder what they're going to have to deal with, It's interesting. Have to be pretty on the ball, right?
It's a very strange world, because for the first time in human history, you can go on YouTube or a blog or any number of websites and learn at a high level almost any skill. And not only that, but then you have the ego comparison of seeing, like you said, these 6-year-old virtuosos that are playing violin better than like a 30-year-old. And it's just, the internet has done incredible and horrible things at the same time. Like, I feel like the standards and the bar has been in some ways dropped and the education level where the masses don't know what art and music actually is, like art and music in quotes, like they don't know what actual real art should or could be. But at the same time, people are playing, like you said, the craft and mastery of learning from tutorials is like off the charts. And it's, at times I'll look on Instagram and I'm like, wow, I got to quit making art because this 12-year-old is way better than I am skill-wise, But then there's the creative part of it. Like I remember a lesson when I was in grammar school, my teacher in art was showing us Picasso for the first time. And I said, I think I made some kind of wise ass comment like I could paint that. And she sat me down and said, explained maybe at some point you can take a brush and make these strokes the same, but to come up with the idea, that's something that you can't be taught necessarily. So that's something that's not instilled enough, I think. The ideas is where the power is, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's an intriguing thing too, and also I can think of several different outfits, that are online outfits, like there's a band called Scary Pockets. Have you ever seen those guys? They're in LA.
No.
Okay, so this is a guy who's I think his name is Jack Conte, and he's got a band. It's like a house band, and they are excellent players, and they play all the previous hits from like the last 20 years with a lot of very cool young LA singers. So I would say anybody check it out if you like that kind of thing. Now he's also at the same time the guy who invented Patreon. He's the founder of Patreon. So this guy is just like, and he's a very intense music cat, and he's like obviously a business guy. He's got $1 billion corporation there on the side, and they're jamming all the time anyhow. So the level of skill is just extraordinary. But it's interesting. They do original music too, but their ability to take existing forms and just kind of wrap themselves around it and perfect it. But then I look at somebody like Stevie Wonder, and I go like, it's like, you said that experience of seeing your kids born. You feel like God is descending onto the into the arena. I worked a couple times with Stevie Wonder, which was just incredible experience, just being in a room with that guy. But you listen to his music and go, it's a singularity. There's not even anything other than utter originality of shaping and structuring. So that leaves a lot of things. And then, for example, I heard this guy Jacob Collier. Do you know? Have you heard of him? He's a really talented vocalist, and he creates. This is a new form. He created a pastiche of a Stevie Wonder song called "Overjoyed." You know that song, and then he just puts it up on the internet, and you can sing the song on top of it, and it's got like 30 vocal parts, and it's just unbelievable. The harmonies, the structure of it is unbelievable. So, but then there's the Stevie Wonder song. There's a set in the jewel of it. So I think these generations, you're probably in your 30s. Would I guess?
40s actually.
40s?
Yeah. I'm actually
look how great you look.
At the tail end of my 40s actually.
No.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Many years of I keep telling my friends, I'm like many years of being vegan and vegetarian and doing yoga and I guess genetics.
I think this is people should ask you how you're doing it, because it's you also have a youthful aspect to energetically, right?
Well, thank you. When I was
you don't look all burned out yet.
I eat incredibly healthy. I prioritize my nutrition just as much as my spiritual life, just as much as my family. Like my family, my sleep, and my business are like my top focuses. And I think it's important to eliminate all the toxicity and all the nonsense. And if you just focus on whatever who was that person that said that pick your top 3? I totally forgot her name. One of the people from like Facebook. She came up with a book, pick your top 3. You can only focus on like 3 things at once. And I think it's really true. So for me, especially after having twins, sleep is way up there. Family and sleep and my career are my bigger things I focus on. So.
Now, and Melissa told me you have a book coming out in the fall.
I do.
Is that right?
I do. It's been a really long project. It's been my back burner project for about 5 years now, and for the past 6-7 months, it's been in like the editing and all that kind of design stuff phase. So I'm expecting, from what I hear from the emails from my editors and designers, that by November it should be good. So knock on Formica over here. It should be
Formica.
Good to go.
Good one. And what's the book called?
Untangling Creativity: The Artist's Pursuit of Purpose, Prosperity, and Soul. So it's kind of a similar shelf that your book potentially is on.
Sure.
So
I think it's the topic coming up. It's interesting. I've had people tell me, oh, we've developed a platform, and again, in addition to making a record, I created a whole educational platform called Dharma Moon. And people can go to dharmamoon.com and you'll see. And it's basically it's called a mindfulness-based education platform and global community. I think that's where it's going. I mean, the mindfulness thing is saturated already. It's just a thingy thing. And then it's like mindfulness and what, and what are you going to put in your coffee blend and mix together? So I'm pretty much of the mind. I think it's a little ahead of the curve because curve has to catch up. But how one of the things we say on the Dharma Moon website is where spiritual practice, creativity, and everyday life have equal weight.
Yes,
that's what I said. So that you are a perfect iteration of that. They have equal weight for you. It's not like you're saying, I want to leave this behind and go off into the caves and become a great yogi. And you're not saying, well, the hell with all that. I just want to be successful and make a lot of money. You're a blended experience. And I really think that's, if you can help people to see that's that achieving balance in that way is one of the real arts of living. So I'm proud that your book and my book would be on the same shelf.
I am as well. I truly am. It's so nice to connect with someone that's like-minded, and I feel like so when I first started writing my book, I thought that I was going to contribute to other artists, and I thought at first that would come in the form of like teaching more pragmatic stuff, right? So like just like if you went on YouTube or you went on a blog, you would find formulamatic. Is that a word? Formula-driven stuff, right? So formula-driven strategies, recipes on succeeding or being a better artist or business, blah, blah, blah. And what I discovered through the very lengthy writing process is that the stuff that really matters is the stuff before or in between those step 1, 2, 3 things. Like everyone, when they first want to learn how to paint or play a song, teach me how to play this song. Teach me how to paint an eyeball. Teach me how to play this chord. As opposed to understanding like the why and what the purpose is and what your intention is and how to kind of wrap that with a package of how to succeed, whatever that means for you with business and otherwise. And I think that you've done such a great job at that, like tying together the business and the teaching and your music. And I know you work with your wife, which I really would love to understand that dynamic as well, because my wife and I worked together quite a bit as well.
No, I'm not married.
Oh, you're not? Okay. I think I saw something
but
were...
My previous wife was a yoga teacher.
Okay.
No, it's okay.
Okay.
It was a big part of my life. It was it was all good.
Insert foot in mouth. Here we go.
I had a big yoga studio in New York called Om Yoga, which was her project. But then we sort of mixed it up with the Dharma and the music stuff.
Okay.
So that was, there was a lot of people who came through there. Her name was Cindy Lee.
Okay.
It still is Cindy Lee, but yeah, we haven't been together for about a decade.
Okay, my apologies on that. I was digging into just trying to learn more about it. I was digging in, and I didn't look at the date. So there we go.
Yeah, no, yeah, and I would say it's tricky working. Did you say you and your wife work together?
We kind of bounce stuff off each other quite a bit. We have worked together in previous carnations of business and things of that sort, but we kind of bounce things off each other. Throwing the ball back and forth, which I think is a nice dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, it's some couples really, have their business tied in, and Cindy and I always kept our business integrated, but not like we didn't own each other's pieces of each other's business. I didn't want to, but you're gonna find somebody. I have a theory about why people get together in the first place, to do a certain amount of learning curve. That person might have some attributes that you want to assimilate, and vice versa. And so some couples, I know some couples are really, really joined at the hip, like they really, really are working on everything together. And of course, raising children, that's a powerful thing to do with somebody else.
Sure is.
That's huge.
And
that'll be forever,
Absolutely. I talk to, as you do, I talk to a lot of creative people, and I was talking to a friend of mine who kind of works with and teaches authors, and I was talking to him the importance of spirituality in my mindfulness practice and meditating as much as possible, usually I try to have a daily practice, but if not, it's throughout the day. I have mindfulness moments, and I was trying to explain that to him, and he didn't quite understand it. And he gave me the reaction I get quite a bit from people that don't meditate or don't have a mindfulness practice of like, you just sit there, like there's so much to do, like you're a dad, you have a business, blah blah blah. Like trying to explain to someone why and how and what the benefits are it's very similar to explaining or trying to talk to someone who used to be an artist or used to play guitar when they were a kid and now they don't, and trying to explain to them why it's still an important integral part of being a human adult. And there are parallels there, and it's interesting. I'd love to hear you kind of go off on those topics.
Well, as I say, this is how I make the medium bucks. I've been teaching meditation for 45 years, and the biggest piece of it is to connect with somebody's current state of mind, where it actually is, and you're introducing a variant. It's kind of a virus in a way. You're putting a virus in there of like that. Actually, the pause or the gap has an enriching potentiality that you might not think so right away. Oh, you're just doing nothing. So from that point of view, people say, well, just meditation is doing nothing, but it actually isn't doing nothing. It's sort of cultivating awareness, which is very precise in a way,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not necessarily goal oriented. And that's where, so you could ask somebody, well, your goal, I think the idea that you really want to introduce is impermanence, which is sort of the blockbuster Buddha idea, that impermanence is part of the fabric of reality. It's not like an added thing. Somebody said, oh, just because you're always having a good time, we're going to like make you get old and die and bring it to an end. It's built into the fabric of the whole situation.
Yeah.
So it has, sometimes I use a synthesizer envelope as a way of explaining, okay, the synthesizer it rises from space. There's nothing. Then there's the attack part of the envelope.
Mm-hmm.
On set, which is, by the way, how most of the tone is generated. If you know anything about synthesizers,
Mm-hmm.
that first tenth of a second is where you recognize it as a flute or a violin or whatever. Then it has the sustain part, which means we're sort of doing this now. And then it decays, and then you're back into the open space again. That is exactly the right way to practice meditation. You, in any kind, including visualizations or mantras, anything, you should leave space for the open space, and you should just allow your mind to relax into that kind of openness. Then whatever practice you're doing, whether it's attention to the breath or some kind of sadhana practice or whatever you have, you let that come in, and then you become familiar with that atmosphere, and then you let it go, and then you dissolve it into the open space. So that's life itself, as far as I'm concerned. Look at everything is like that.
Yeah. Do you still...
So to tune into that is really important, I think, for people, and not just to think it's all action. It's not all action. There's space.
Do you still maintain a yoga practice, David?
No, I was never a big yogi. It's funny. I married a yogi.
Okay.
Yogi.
That wasn't your thing, though.
I liked it, but I studied Tai Chi for about 20 years now.
Oh, cool.
So if I have a physical practice, it's much closer to that. Many spiritual practitioners, meditators do or could have some kind of physical movement practice that's related to moving meditation. So the Tai Chi changed the way I sit, for example. Like I used to sit like one of those Buddhist statues, and now I sit more like a piece of algae. It's like, okay, there is movement and stillness, and there's stillness and movement. So yeah, so that's my practice, and I've been doing the sword form. I really like that. I've been a swordsman my whole life too. I was a European style fencer when I was in high school and college.
Oh, that's
I
cool.
like swords. I like blades.
That's cool.
I like cutting through to the thing.
That's my kids would love that. They have like Nerf swords, and I was like big into ninjas and martial arts when I was a kid. So that's really cool to me.
Yeah, I mean, martial arts is what a world that is, and then there's the hard ones and the soft ones, So I would say maybe I have almost an equal influence of Taoism into my cultural perception of things as Buddhism, but I'm really kind of a hard rock Buddhist.
A hard rock Buddhist.
Yeah. But, the idea of just even something as simple as yin and yang, and people go, well, that's just corny. It's not that corny when you really understand That there's, you can associate. It's harder these days to identify with masculine and feminine principles because of people's relationship to those words and feelings. But you could say yin and yang, and also, recognize that there's the receptive and an active part of every action. So, you're a vinyasa practitioner. Is that what you do?
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
As per, did you study with a teacher or anybody?
Yeah, I've been to, many studios. So I started practicing yoga probably, I want to say, maybe 10, 11 years ago, after a couple years of my now wife urging me to do it. And I thought it was like just for girls and silly, and I didn't want to do it.
Oh.
And then I jumped into a hot yoga class and realized it was like the hardest thing I had ever done in my life. And
makes a grown man cry.
Yeah, the idea that I wasn't able to like properly touch my toes was kind of motivation enough for my ego to be like, okay, well, this is embarrassing. So then I just kind of became it became an art form where I saw the shapes I was making with my body as almost like the same challenge I would feel as though I was trying to create a shape with my paintbrush, and it became a challenge and also a practice in being comfortable with resistance that I have found translates to me sitting in front of my easel when I feel that resistance. I think the more you can kind of pull those lessons into different areas, the more they kind of seep into each other. And so that's the big payback for me when I do meditation, is understanding what resistance feels like, where it's coming from, how it's manifesting, and how to just let it kind of, just like you said, kind of dissolve and just be and see where it's coming from. And as I'm painting, I will find myself, and I would love to hear your musical equivalent of this, but I'll be painting, trying to force theory, this should be working, this freaking yellow should work, and then I'll kind of like settle into it and realize it was totally the wrong color, or it was the wrong objective I was trying to achieve. And once I let go of that, just kind of happens.
Yeah. Wow, yellow. It's funny you're saying yellow, because I had some flower arrangements done I have a pool out here, and around the pool there's like some potted plants. And I tried to communicate to the guy who was putting it together, I want some more colorfulness this year. And I didn't say yellow, but I meant yellow. And then he said, okay, I'll get some yellow. And he put it in, and they're just these little tiny yellow flowers. I wanted like big, like yellowness. And you go, okay, well, let me just tune into these little tiny yellow flowers. Maybe that's cool.
Yeah.
So cool. Like Japanese style flower arranging, you let the flowers and the branches tell you where they want to go.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's true. Good musicians do that. One thing I've been saying a lot is it's all one thread. So whatever you apply to one thing, probably if it's a good principle, it'll apply to something else. So maybe moving with the material is good. Maybe not locking in too hard to, like you might have had a vision, but then just let it morph as it goes. What a gift though, Jay, to be able to have your life be art that way. And yoga,
family.
Family.
Yeah,
what
family.
Really, I think from my point of view, that's a very healthy type of life to live. That doesn't have to. There's no warfare going on. You're working with the elements of that are naturally coming to you. So
I feel like
you have a lot to offer to people, Jay.
Thank you.
To share that.
I feel like I would be a fraud if I took that compliment without being honest that there's always the warfare, right? Like I would love to hear from someone with your much more, high, let's say, I don't know how to word this, but I'll just say high-end experience where you've had such amazing collaborations, you've had such amazing success with your own music, with your teaching. You clearly have like that right left brain thing going on, right? And as well, I first of all, I'll preface this by saying I feel very abundant, my family, my career, but I still struggle, I'll use that word loosely, with the warfare of the business aspects, right? More clearly, like living in New Jersey is a very expensive area. Having 3 children is very expensive, and it feels like I'm still on that hamster wheel. No matter how well I do, there's always something else to pay for, something else to worry about. Do you have either pragmatic advice, spiritual advice, any kind of advice on, or maybe stories on how you took your interests, curiosity, and your schooling, and how the heck did that become to the point you're at now, and where you've gone?
Yeah. Oh Lord, I the way I look at it is there's different times in life, and where you are, I used to call it the sandwich years, because you have the children, and I don't know, are your parents still around?
They are. They're not doing super great, to be honest, but they are around.
Well, there you go. There you go.
Yeah.
You're the sandwich between uh, now you're having to pay some attention to helping your parents along, and you have pressure on the other side with your kids coming up, and it's like it's like a hero sandwich, but you're the meatball. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's a time when you don't have a lot of slack on the rope. You got to really be leaning in. It's a time for me when I had to really focus a little bit more on livelihood because of the pressure of that.
Mm.
And you know I did a lot of for about 20 years. I had the good fortune and also the kind of unusual experience of I wanted to still be in the music world and writing music, and I got a job writing music for a soap opera called One Life to Live. And then I got another one called As the World Turns. I had two of the biggest soap operas on network television. I have 4 Emmys to prove it. And I had to use my smart. So I guess working smarter is the only antidote for working harder.
Mm.
And just but you're going to have a certain amount of pressure at that stage of life because you're the meatball and the hero sandwich. You're the hero in the hero sandwich, really. Think about it. You're a hero to your kids. Now you're a hero to your parents, and it's a certain amount of stretch. So cleverness, and then I guess I have one word for everybody out there, which is like the secret mantra: IP.
Okay. IP.
You know what it stands for?
You're peeing under the table right now.
No, no. IP Daily, no. Intellectual property.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
I have a whole chapter in my book about it.
Mm.
Figure out what you want to do as the meatball in the hero sandwich is figure out a way to make money while you're sleeping.
Right.
Since you're getting a good night's sleep, you said, why not make money while you're sleeping? Which means, your artwork, I still the prints, so the prints
Sure.
can be reproduced, right?
Yeah. I mean, I absolutely learned the value of passive income many, many, many years ago, and multiple streams of income also. But it's like, getting it to that one life to live level is a different story. Getting it to that level where you're.
Well, you have to tapping a vein. Like I tapped a vein then. Like they go look in your arm for the vein when they're trying to take blood, and you
Right.
go like they tap it, and you've got to find it. So you need to find a zone in which the current is there. There was a certain amount of good fortune for me in that, and a certain amount of skill of being able to parlay the situation. For example, I made it through 5 different producers on a network TV show, and that was by being frankly skillful in adapting to different people's personalities that you have to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And I also trained a lot of composers to work with me to create the music. So, getting other people to subcontract parts of the work that you can. And then the big goonie, which I'm working on right now, is marketing. And here's the thing: people who are good marketers are like, it's almost like if you're choosing up sides for volleyball, that's the person who's going to spike the ball, and they're the tall person up near the front of the net, and people can look tall and gangly, and it doesn't mean they can spike the ball. So if you're getting help in your marketing, and I think probably that's broken up these days into social media, it's broken up into all kinds of. I think I know you have a good email list, right? You developed that.
I'm fortunate to have a great email list. Yeah.
Well, that's just then. It might be interesting to think what else you could move through there with the rest of the cattle. That like, but I feel you on that. And you got 3 kids, and here's the good news: they're going to grow up, and here's the bad news: they're going to grow up and go to schools that are going to cost you money. In all likelihood, so it's just a kind of throw it back and chug kind of time of life, and it's a beautiful the fact that you're engaging so many parts of it is very inspiring to me. That you haven't given up on your artwork and just got a job at a bank is like a lot of people out there listening are going to go, "Hey, man, this guy's taking a swing at the ball at least," you know.
Yeah,
So
I've
the one
only.
thing is, how about just selling more of those prints? That's what I would do.
Well, yeah. I mean, I obviously sell as many as I can. I'm not like telling people they can't buy them if they want them. I'm not saying you can't buy that, man. The store is always
but
open 24/7.
Well, look, I'm a simple-minded person. I never had seen them before. I live out at the beach. There's one I liked. I think it was called Curl, maybe. It had a kind of it was very narrow band, and then it had a kind of a wave coming up over the surfer, and it's it's sort of more long than wide. I thought it was called Curl, maybe lip, maybe lip,
cut lip, maybe cut lip blue.
Lip is that
cut lip, like a teal piece, kind of teals and blues. That one.
Yeah.
Cut.
What word did you?
Cut lip.
Yeah, that one. So it's an interesting thing to think of. Like, well, it's eclectic, but here's a guy like me who didn't know about it and probably would. In fact, I'm just going to tell you, I'm going to go buy one after we finish talking. No. I'm going to buy it because I look through which one would I identify with and for my house here. And I like to support people. But how do you get more people to know about it?
Right. That's the magic question every artist and musician wants to know, right? How do you, because you have to have that person, like you said, spiking the ball. Usually to hire someone like that costs lots of money. So I wear every hat in the business myself. And, I do as much as I can, as every artist listening or every musician listening does. You do as much as you can. But there does, like you mentioned a couple times, which I'd love to dive into, you did mention there are times of good fortune. Whether it's luck, whether it's created luck, whether it's karma, whatever you describe it as. But there are...
So
tell me.
Let me give you a take on that. Because,
please.
Again, I tried to leave it all on the field with this book because I know I'm not going to be around forever. And I just thought, well, if I have any kind of accumulation of particularities, I want to put it all together.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a whole chapter on what's called tendril, which is a Tibetan word for auspicious coincidence. So it's not just synchronicity. Synchronicity is firing all the time. I know you must tune into it.
Mm-hmm.
But tendril is auspicious synchronicity when you notice, like you might be sitting at a table in a restaurant, you're talking about something, like, and you say the word cinematic, and then the person at the table behind you happen to hear that they just said the word cinematic. And then you look over and it's Francis Ford Coppola at the table or whatever. When those things happen, you got to go with it.
Yes.
It's like a very special kind of delivery system, and I'm sure you know Pete Holmes. You know Pete?
I don't think I do.
He's a comedian. He had a HBO special called Crashing.
Okay.
And he's got a great podcast called You Made It Weird. And I've been on it a bunch of times, and we're friends. And we were talking about this tendril thing, and I said, it's like 220 volts. Everything's 110, and when you tap into the tendril, it feels like a little more electric. And everybody who does what we do knows that feeling when it's happening. And then the exercise is when you notice it, you intentionally activate whatever it's pointing towards.
Mm.
You don't go, okay, well, that would have been nice, You add a little extra spike into your intentionality to go, oh, this is being delivered here right at this moment. I should do something with this.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make any sense?
It completely does. I wrote about some of these topics as well because it is a very interesting topic. And what I've found from my own experience is that these sorts of synchronicity or these synchronous moments or these coincidences or these types of intuition are very interesting and very important, but they're also sort of on that same like walkie-talkie frequency that the bad ideas are at. The things that you shouldn't be listening. Like those little voices sound an awful like, hey, do those drugs, do that bad thing. Like it's like there's. So how do you, with your students or with yourself, how do you differentiate that little voice? Hey, David, do this bad thing, or hey, David, do this great thing. Like,
yeah, that's so cool. You realize how sweet and adorable that is, that they should be that close together. The part of you that generates life and the part of you that eliminates waste are literally inches from each other on your human body.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a certain irony to all of it. But here's what I would say, and of course this is all updatable. That my teacher said, first thought, best thought. That was like a kind of, and in fact, a book of poems called that. So first thought has to arise very clean from open space, and just like, pop, you go, bingo, I'm going to build a bridge to Staten Island or whatever. World's first suspension bridge. I'm going to make a computer and Apple computers. That first thought is very clean, but it's differentiable from impulse. Now, impulse is more like I've got a kind of fetid garden, a funky garden of swamp things, and it's just brewing at a subconscious level for most of my life, and then something just comes up from it and goes like, why don't you just go out in the woods and smoke a joint? And that's not first thought.
Yeah.
But it feels like it. It feels like, wow, that's a great idea. So somehow the impulse is coming. It's not coming from the same ground exactly, but it could feel like, I'm having an original thought here. But first thought comes from a very almost pre-thought level, non-thought level. So I guess you have to develop a nose for that. And you know what it is? The habitual patterns stink, actually. They have a smell.
Yeah, I feel like it's like
they have an odor.
It's kind of like what we talked about earlier, where you were saying kind of riding that edge, whether it's surfing or whether it's creating the creative process. There's an edge between this really fucking hurts and this is really amazing, and it's kind of like, woo, I'm right in the middle here, And it's like, yeah. Even when I'm painting and when I attempt to play my guitar that's behind me, there's moments of where it feels like almost chaotic and destruction, where you're just kind of thrashing at it and going crazy because it's emotionally fun, and then the other part kind of kicks in and be like, let me have fun with this and see what I can do. It's like when you're cleaning your room and let me just tear all the shit off the walls and I'm going to organize it now. It's kind of like you need that, the leaves, biodegrading to turn into soil, and then something pretty grows out of it. It's like I feel like we all have that inside of us, that need to kind of both destroy and disorganize and organize and create.
Well, and the odd thing is that real inspiration, the companion of that is discipline. There's just no way around it. When we first started talking about all this, I thought of a real seminal moment in my life, which is the first time I ever heard John Coltrane play.
Oh, Coltrane.
And it was a Love Supreme, which
him.
Was really the first time the jazzers connected with the New Agers. It was an interesting moment. And, I might have been 15. That's a long time ago. But I heard that record and I went, oh, this guy's got incredible discipline, but it's also, he's just really, really feeling his way into new space. So that's the ticket. Is I think if you want to play really great free jazz, you need a lot of discipline, and impulse is lazy basically. It's recycling something that you read. It feels familiar and has a little bit of a smell to it.
If you are an artist, a musician, a creative person, an entrepreneur, chances are you're one of those things if you're listening to this podcast. And there's a good chance that you also know what a pain in the butt it is to deal with stocking inventory and designs of your apparel and your merchandise and trying to make money from your talents or build your brand. I've been using a company called Printful for several years now. They're a print-on-demand company that will link up with your e-store, your e-commerce store, and with a little simple drag and drop, you can take your designs, your artwork, your logo, your branding, and plop it onto accessories and merchandise, things like iPhone covers and towels and shirts and hoodies and all kinds of cool stuff that you can monetize and sell on your e-commerce store or on your website. It takes just a second to sign up. You can do so on jalders.com/printful. By doing so and using that link, I get a sliver of a sliver of a sliver of a percentage. And it's a great way to show support to the show, as well as myself and my family, and I would greatly appreciate it if you're going to use them, to use that link. It's jalders.com/printful. One more quick thing. If you guys have not yet checked out my artwork, it would mean the world to me for you to go to jalders.com and snoop around my website. No pressure to buy anything, but I would love to get your eyeballs on my art. Just having people know about what I do helps so much. I also have quite an extensive presence on social media, so if you're not yet following me and the show on both Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and what else? Pinterest, all those things, TikTok. You could find me at Jay Alders at pretty much all of them. I'd love to make that connection with you. So again, the website's jalders.com. Appreciate all the love and support. Please tell everyone about the show, and if you love it, please leave a review on Apple. It helps us a lot with all the algorithm stuff. All right, back to the conversation. Thanks for listening. We talked about kind of like narcotics and psychoactive substances earlier with the creative process. I don't really think jazz, from what I know at least, what I've read, jazz wouldn't really exist were it not for like weed and cannabis being infused into like, the music culture back then. And like
let's go a little further.
Yeah,
heroin.
Please. Heroin, yeah.
Heroin.
Right?
Yeah, I don't think weed would have done it.
Like the beat poets and like jazz and that whole movement, would it ever have existed? And that kind of begs the question. It obviously does have a place, potentially, or have we evolved past its need? And I'm speaking from someone.
I think heroin. If you're going to compare things, when you see somebody get that hooked on something that's that bad for you, that's like. That should be a no-brainer for people now. Right. You're talking about people who are like really in a very difficult relationship to society at that point, who are brilliant geniuses, unacknowledged. Somebody like Coltrane had to play. How jazz got invented? They had to play those stupid songs. Those well-known songs. So, I think I'll just take a little liberty here and a little liberty there, and all of a sudden you got jazz. Yeah. So, and then after that, maybe there's more runway for creative people who are culturally disenfranchised, really. So, I think what anybody needs at any time is also cultural and there's social factors too. And if the society has a certain amount of appreciation of art and creativity, I'm not sure how many Danish jazz musicians had to become heroin addicts to play. Right. So I think some of that is social and cultural. And I wouldn't recommend anybody doing anything that's bad for your body. No, 100%. I mean, I live a very, very clean lifestyle, but it is something that I think about because I love classic rock. I love jazz. I love a lot of art and music that was created by people that were emotionally, chemically, or psychoactively or spiritually just fucked up. And it does kind of... There is a romance to it that society has developed. There is some truth to the fact that does open portals. Like, would Jimi Hendrix have done what he did were it not for things flowing through his body? No one knows. I have no idea. It is interesting as an artist or a creative person, though, because many of us feel like the legacy that we leave with our work, a lot of times we put that on a pedestal. Like, this is the most important thing, and a lot of people have died for that chase or that validation. It's hard to come up with a ultimate statement about this because there is something about exploring the edges of experience, and one of the edges of experience is impermanence. I'll say it again. You can develop the perfect yoga lifestyle, the perfect nutrition lifestyle, and it's just, you don't know. You could be run over by a bus. You get cancer anyhow. People say, "Oh, look, they got cancer. They must have been doing." No. It's just we don't know all the causes and conditions for certain karmas to arise. So, and one of the ones that's universal is impermanence. So, I know Taoist masters, some legendary ones who maybe live to 200 or so. They call them immortals. They can live for a very long time. You can reverse aging processes. But it goes by like that anyhow. Now you're 250. All your friends have died 6 times over, right. And you're going like, what? So impermanence, I believe, has something about it that is means to be making room for something to end, so something else could start. And any art form that doesn't include an understanding of impermanence probably is a little bit theistic or idealistic,
the topics you're talking about make me want to ask you about ego, both the part of ego that says you're the worst thing on the planet and the part that says you're the greatest thing in the world. I would imagine you've probably had experience in that. How have you learned to both deal with criticism maybe earlier in your career when there may or may not have been more than now? And what can, someone listening, and someone that's an up and coming artist, someone that's let go of their art, someone that's struggling, what can you tell them to kind of find peace or let go of that part of themselves that's really holding them back, the ego itself?
Wow. Phew. That's deep, Jay. I had a friend who's just a magnificent person and very bold and kind of brassy. We go into a bar and always have adventures and stuff like that. And at a certain point, I asked him, I said, can you imagine what a room would feel like without you in it? What would that be like? A J-less universe? So whether our ego is small, big, or, accentuated by needing for approval or needing to be denigrated, there's a kind of common thread of a central reference point that is kind of clinging to itself for some unknown ungodly reason. And then the ultimate, like, little switches, it doesn't actually exist. You look for it, you do contemplation, or you do any kind of scrutiny. You go, hey, you know what? I'm not sure where that thing is even. That it feels, where is it? Is it in your elbow? Is it in your brain? And you can't find it. And that doesn't even help because your habit is to still reconstruct it. So probably the best spiritual practices are deconstructive, in my opinion, rather than constructive.
Okay.
Like start by peeling away or seeing what would it be like, for example, if you had less self-orientation. So that's called Mahayana Buddhism. What would it be like if you thought about other people, on equal or greater footing than how you structure your own sense of importance? What would it be like if you dialed it down? What would it be like if you let it go for minutes at a time and just experience space and awareness just without that, which is called meditation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and then the cosmic joke is it was never there in the first place.
But we still have to kind of play the game as though it is real, right? It's like that Elon Musk thing with the simulation theory,
I don't
right?
think we have to play the game.
Well, we're playing it now. No?
We're just having a conversation, right?
Yeah, but I mean, on some level, it's kind of like a game, isn't it? We're batting the ball back and forth with conversation. We're connecting over certain topics that are of interest to us.
Okay, so that opens up another channel, which is while you're playing the game, get your heart into the game, because heart is not really ego, actually. Devotion or love or compassion, those are not really ego-based experiences. So you could look at it like you're making love in a conversation or when you're doing your artwork. And I think that actually, believe it or not, that pulls out a lot of the ego from it, because there's real passion in it. There's real engagement and there's real care. So I don't know, when you see people who are very compassionate, it's like they don't have a big ego usually, right?
I'm not sure. I think I think it's like that edge again. I know a lot of people that are very passionate, that are in the flow state, but there's also, they're riding on the edge of enjoying some level of the validation that comes with it. I know a lot of rock stars and musicians, and I'll see them in front of 30,000 people, and they're off stage are the most mellow, chill people. And I know a lot of these bigger egoic things don't matter per se, but then you have a conversation and they still will admit, yeah, I still enjoy being looked at or appreciated, or whatever the terminology that may be used. I think they're yin and yang again, that there's both sides.
And there's also, like, when you're saying that, I'm thinking there's a need there, and there's an emptiness that still isn't being filled. So then that's your situation to work with. And that's why it's good that there are rock stars. That's probably karmically, that's the jag that they're working with. But you can't confuse that with fulfillment or contentment. because that doesn't need anything.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're content, you don't really need those things, and you can distribute them. It's an interesting thing. I've been working in the entertainment business my whole adult life, and my role has been as a producer, a music director. So I work with the big egos, but I kind of stay a little bit off on the side. And, um, um, there's an interesting lack of contentment, and this is this other book I wrote about the six realms called Awakening from the Daydream, the Wheel of Life. That's something all of our friends should study, because it's a really basic Buddhist teaching called the Wheel of Life, and it's about the six realms. And it's the two realms that are at the top of the chain are the God realm and the jealous God realm. And the God realm is like, people, you got it, man. You made it. All these things that you and I are like scuffling for and going like, you said, I wish I could sell more paintings. All of a sudden your bank, your Stripe account is just gorged with money, and people are buying your paintings for $70,000, $80,000. And, you're showing up places and getting the best table. Now you would think, well, geez, man, now that person's going to be content, but actually they end up almost in a more needy situation than you were before that happened. You've seen it. I've seen it. I'm pretty sure what I'm saying here. So in the Wheel of Life, the jealous God realm and the God realms are considered the kind of golden traps, but still trapped. And the realm in which you can achieve enlightenment is the human realm. Being a guy in New Jersey with 3 kids, and and working with your spiritual practice and your art and aging parents, that's where you can have realization. Mm-hmm. You can't get it in the God realm and the jealous God realm because you're too preoccupied. And I've been around it enough to really feel like those things are very seductive potentially, and people who have the karmas to accumulate those, it's not going to be so easy to let it go. So, for example, they get older, and then they don't look so beautiful anymore, and they got gobs of plastic surgery, or they try to buy their way out of it. And then it gets kind of desperate, and then you kind of fall through the realms. And they say that when you die in the God realms, you end up like in the hungry ghost realms and the hell realms, because you don't have the balance. It's an addiction.
Yeah, very true. It's very.
You
relatable.
can argue if you don't. Argue with me if you want.
No, I mean I hear, I connect with what you're saying. I have similar viewpoints. It's very interesting topics. For me, I find that when I'm painting, I try to be aware of the different entities kind of taking control. Like I feel like if I'm painting a certain thing, sometimes it almost feels like an entity is coming in. So if I'm working on a detailed section of my painting with little dots, that part of me might want to listen to classical music. But if I'm working on another part of my painting, that guy really loves listening to jazz. And they're completely different people, different entities, different energies. And there's a part of me when I'm painting that I genuinely will feel like, I'm fucking awesome. This is great. I'm a genius. And then there's a part of me like that. I'm like, the next guy is listening to pure silence. I'm like, well, I got to start looking for a new job because I am the worst painter ever on earth. And so
no, listen, there is no artist that has not experienced what you're 100%, talking about.
Yeah.
Including the most successful and the least successful. And, it's such an interesting thing. Like I was telling you about this Pandemonia album project. Some of those things came out so purely that I just feel like they're perfect, compositions in a way. And then I visualize them sounding a certain way. Then you have to realize it and make it happen. And then I play it. I just have gotten to the point where I'm playing for people, and I go, oh my God, this person loves this track, and another person hates that track. So there's nothing in it that's universal in that sense. And then you just got to really soften into, that's just the way it's going to be, and we're going to be fragile. You don't put your little beating heart out there on a canvas or on a an MP3, and not get ready to get smashed like into a cyclotron of like self-doubt and also self-flagellation. It's just it's kind of, it's the game. That is the game. You're right.
So I can't let you go before you tell me a couple good juicy stories, because you mentioned a couple times you've had good fortune. You mentioned Jerry Garcia and hanging out with very influential, cool people, in air quotes. Can you maybe tell me I guess those early moments when it was still very novel, the idea of being behind the velvet rope, or when your music first hit. You mentioned your hit song, and are there some early moments where it was still very magical and very alluring and new and just cool? Like, what did that feel like going from I'm a guy that's working my ass off, maybe struggling, maybe not, and to going like, oh, I made it, whatever that may have meant at that time. What did that feel like? What was it like? Can you tell me about that a little bit?
Well, it's so sweet in a way to even think about that, and my mind right away goes to I went to Columbia College and I graduated from Columbia College, but I had no idea what I was going to do because I thought I was going to be a doctor like my father, but that obviously wasn't meant to be. And I was a guitar player already, and I actually, in my family, there was a music side and there was the healing side. There was the doctors and the theater people. My mother was a famous theater producer, and she actually was the first woman to win a Tony for a show, on producing a show on Broadway. So, and my uncle was a music director, a really great jazz piano player. So I kind of lean towards that side of the family now that I'm thinking about it, and got a job right away playing in guitar in a Broadway show, and then I schlepped my guitar around for a couple of years down in Greenwich Village when it was a really cool, fun young place to be. And a lot of people, somebody would be playing one of those clubs one day and a limo would pull up the next day, with Clive Davis in it, and all of a sudden that person's like a big star. I mean, it was like people being plucked out of this very cool, folksy environment. And to some extent, that's what happened to me. So I, in one of those clubs, and it was just fun to be there. And I would schlep my amp and my guitar 3 blocks from NoHo, where I lived, a 5-story walk up. I carry my amp, my guitar. Then every night, bring it down and go play at 3 of those clubs.
Yeah.
So in its own way, that was actually, now that I'm thinking about it, that was the rich time. However, I bumped into a singer there named Maria Muldaur, who was, kind of, obviously everybody felt was very talented, and she and her husband had just been signed to Warner Brothers Records. And then I kind of hooked up with her as a music director, and I wrote a song that she sang, and all of a sudden it was huge. And Midnight at the Oasis is still a standard, and it was a huge record. And all of a sudden I'm in a different completely position. I'm moving out to California, living in a house on Mulholland Drive. It's all surreal now that I'm telling it.
Yeah.
And I went in and bought a car for cash. I've been a little schlepping artist on Thompson Street. So having lived through that at a fairly early stage in my career, and then scoring feature films and working with some very on records with major artists, and being a guitar player. And then I went off and was the director of a Buddhist meditation center in Vermont for $25 a week. After that, from there, I went from Mulholland Drive to Vermont. So in looking at all that, I see it all as extremely beautiful at this point. Really deeply beautiful. And of course, totally painful at times. So that's, I would say, I'm not going to say that one part was better than any other part.
Why the heck would you leave that, or seemingly leave that momentum of like, here I am going to California, I'm this cool young guy with a guitar and blah, blah, blah. Like, why would you not want to be absorbed, or how are you not absorbed in that egoically, if nothing else?
Yeah.
Did something happen where you're like, I got to get the hell out of here because this is destroying
me?
Or?
No, not at all. No, song titles is how people like us know what our mind is really thinking. And I thought the song, I Do It For Your Love, that's why we do everything. And in this case, I loved my Buddhist teacher, and I loved the vision of that. And I felt compelled to work with that. I thought that was very cutting edge at the time and challenging. I just had a new baby. I went from making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to make $25 a week with a wife and a new baby. And
Did your wife think you were crazy? That's like nuts.
Oh, a lot of people thought I was crazy, and people still think I'm crazy.
Okay.
And I'm not the one who's going to argue with them about that, but I still say that if you're moved by what you're doing, and your heart is telling you to do something, you should just pack it up and go do it. And the heart is where the wisdom is.
Mm.
And the head is unusually, in a simple way, where the wisdom drips down and you can implement from there, but the heart is the wisdom seat. So, like, look at your kids and you'll do anything for them, right?
Absolutely.
So it doesn't matter. You don't think, well, but, you don't have to think it through. You just go, I'm in. Deal me in.
Yeah.
So, and then I believe that it will form a pastiche. Your life will be a unique pastiche. And that's why I like supporting younger people a lot and encouraging. I like to encourage people because I feel each life is a unique pastiche, and it'll reveal itself as time goes on. If you move towards that which really, really gets you in the heart.
Mm. The heart.
I don't know if I've ever said that way before.
You should write that one down. You should tweet that one.
It's just I just did.
You did indeed. Did you grow up in Brooklyn? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Manhattan.
Manhattan?
Lower East Side.
Okay.
Stuyvesant Town. Did you grow up in Brooklyn?
My parents grew up in Brooklyn. I wasn't sure where in New York you grew up. I figured I'd ask in case you never know. My mom, they left Brooklyn when I was in the womb. My mom grew up on Troy Avenue in Flatbush, and my dad grew up East 45th and Church. So yeah.
Wow. And where did they move to?
Ocean County, New Jersey, the Jersey Shore. They just picked up, and they wanted a better life for their family they were starting, and so yeah, that's where I've been.
Wait, so you grew up in New Jersey?
I did. Yeah. I grew up.
And you're there now?
I grew up not too far from where I am now, although now I'm like pretty darn close to the beach. I'm a little closer to the beach, and then I lived up in North Jersey near New York. I went to school in Montclair, so I lived up in Hoboken and Belleville and East Rutherford and all those northern towns for about a decade. I did that whole thing, and then I found it was making me a little too edgy, and I was ready to kind of go back to the beach. So I did a big U-turn and went back.
So do you have any karma with England?
England. I did an ancestry DNA thing, and somewhere in my distant past, someone was from England, but my mom's side is Polish, and my dad's side is like German and then Canadian, which, yeah.
Well, listen, it's so nice to meet you, Jay.
It's a pleasure.
It really is, a really great feeling, and I'm going to root for your artwork. I work with a lot of artists in a sort of life coaching kind of way, and I like seeing how somebody can light it up, and it just feels like that could light up more. Those paintings. That's
certainly in my intention to do so. So I appreciate that.
Is it focal point?
Yeah, leaving a legacy of helping people, inspiring people. Even from the time I was in grammar school, that's always been my intention to use my talents to help people and to inspire. As we get ready to go, are there places that people can find you? What your current projects? Like, let's kind of tell people, how they can find you and what they should look for.
Well, thank you. When is this going to air?
Probably in about a week.
In a week,
or less. Yeah, a week or less.
Okay. Well, in that case, I'd like to direct everybody to our new platform called dharmamoon.com. And Dharma is DHARMA, moon, the usual way, .com. And we're starting to expand first this platform of presenting really good, solidly presented mindfulness meditation practices to people from a kind of authentic and deeper tradition, but also very accessible for modern folk. And we have a program starting on July 19th that's called Foundations of Mindfulness. So if you hear this before then, it's just a 4-week program. You go to dharmamoon.com, you can't miss it. You'll see it there. And jump in because it's a really reasonable cost. It's just $129 for 4 Mondays, and you could get a taste of what this is all about. Then the other program we have is a teacher training program. So one of the things I really want to leave behind is actually properly training teachers in the meditation tradition. So that'll start in the fall. That's also on that website. And I think most of you, and if you're curious about me and what I've done, and it's actually turning into a bigger than me kind of situation. There's quite a whole team and community that's organizing itself. Frankly, people like you, if I could just jump over the hedge there and say, there's a lot of folks who are seriously into, and some quite accomplished in the music world, and we're all meditating together and doing projects and stuff like that. So the bigger vision for Dharma Moon is to go beyond into what we've been talking about, and provide a kind of atmosphere for people like us to come together and just shoot the shit and connect. That's my real vision for it.
I love that. I love what you are doing. I love what you've done, and I'm honored and grateful that you've made time to connect. As you started out this conversation, so many of us have had a weird year, and people like us already are rather secluded. Like I'm in my little studio, and for a good portion of the day I'm kind of by myself creating work or doing work, and musicians are the same way. So it's so nice to have people to kind of sit around the water cooler and talk shop with. So I appreciate that, David. Thank you so much.
And Jay, I've been calling it's the traditional word for it, satsang.
Satsang.
You know that word,
I don't know that word.
Sangha is the community.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of the community of people who are trying to, plug into some kind of conscious living approach, and just to get together.
Yeah. And
just share different views without necessarily, big agenda. Satsang should be very open. And now that I'm saying it, I really think that's an important element of what's happening now. People could just gather and not be so goal oriented for a minute, and not be trying to fix anything that's broken or not broken, but just to visit and explore together. So, more to come, and we're going to have you on my podcast in the fall when your book comes out.
I think October, November-ish, something like that. I'm looking forward to that as well. And I love what you just said so much, because I feel like we're all inundated by, whether you're on social media, whatever platform you're on, it's like people doing time-lapse paintings, or people like doing a fancy thing on their instrument. And it's like, great, those things are awesome. I love them. I'm just as guilty as anyone of consuming them. But it's like this stuff that we're doing now is the stuff that matters, because this stuff is more closely related to why I became an artist and why people become musicians, because there's curiosity, and there's this need for connection and wanting to do something that hasn't been done before, and pulling shit out of thin air and putting it together in a way that's never been done. And like, that's the higher purpose stuff. And the stuff you see on TikTok is cool and fun, and all these little tchotchkes people are making, it's cool. But this is what matters, and I'm grateful that we were able to have this conversation like so much, so sincerely. So thank you. Yeah,
thank you, and all the best to all of your enterprises, and I look forward to staying in touch. And,
please do. Let's try. Maybe if I get out to Montauk, we can link up. I would love that. Or if you make it out to the Jersey Shore, I'll take you surfing. You definitely are. I have plenty of surfboards to throw you.
It's a hard game to start surfing at my age. That would be
no, it's not at all.
No
way.
Really?
No. If you're close to the beach, you should be surfing. Like we can get you on a longboard, and you could be up-riding in one afternoon.
Wow.
100%.
So you would be my coach?
If I can either get there or you come here, I would be honored to take you out. As long as it's a smaller day, so you don't drown or anything.
Okay. All right. And cut to. Okay. Thank you so much for that invite.
You're welcome.
And best wishes, to everybody out there who's listening. And think about community, everybody. Community is a jewel.
Thanks, guys. We hope you loved that episode. If you did love it and could give us some love on iTunes, that would be amazing. You can leave a review, and we will give you a shout out at some point on this podcast.
Also, if you guys can follow us on social media, we would love to hear from you. We are on pretty much every social media platform at Shifting Perceptions Podcast, which is the same as our website, shiftingperceptionspodcast.com. We look and reply to all comments, so please share with your friends, tag us. We appreciate all the love.
And don't forget that all of our guests also see all these comments, so I'm sure if you want to just have a space you can reach out, these are the places to do it.
Special thanks to John Harvey for creating and editing and producing our show's music, and thank you to Kevin Rigby for our photo of our podcast. Appreciate you guys all. Talk to you soon.